how to create your custom night shooting plan. And I want to take you on a journey with me around this barn. This is a barn, and okay, I think it's a barn. It probably isn't a barn. It's probably something other than a barn. It's a structure in rural, thank you, Mark, in rural Minnesota. And, I just want to take you, this was about 26 hours ago, 24 hours ago. I was at this barn with a client. We had booked a private session. It's a corn shed, Mark tells me. Okay, so it's a corn shed. I just learned something. So we had this session to learn about night photography, and I knew about this corn shed / barn down near a couple hours south of the Twin Cities. And so we met there last night. And I want to use this barn as an example for this evening's presentation. And in particular, this is an example from the other side of the country in Arches National Park over a 2-night period where we have a bunch of different multi-image projects, and this is just an example. I'm not going to go through these right now. Corn crib. Okay, Betty, thank you for that. A corn crib, a corn shed. Okay, I'm going to look that up. We're not going to go through these. I'm just giving you an example of the multitude of projects that you can accomplish with careful planning in a very short period of time. And the reason I chose these examples is that each one of these takes a certain amount of time to complete. So there's a light painting example right here. There is a 360 virtual reality panorama. There's some motion time lapses. There's some noise reduction stacking, star trails, moonrise composites, Holy Grail time lapses, other types of panorama. There's all kinds of things to do. And the point here is that if I were to just stroll into the night and start, without a plan, it's highly unlikely I'd be able to accomplish these projects. But with the sort of plan that I'm going to describe this evening, this will really help keep you on track to be super productive. So with that, don't hang up when you see this next slide. We're going to spend the majority of this evening talking about how you can create your version of this night shooting plan. We're going to go through this document in some detail this evening, and I want to use this as an example of how to organize your thoughts. All right, so this is, I call this my night shooting plan. There's probably, if there's a marketing person in the audience, there's probably a way more sophisticated name than a night shooting plan, but this is what I've been calling it for all this time. And like I said, we're going to go through this tonight. But before we get into it, I'd like to bear with me for a second. I was wondering if you could take another sheet of paper and a pen, and just for the sake of argument, Deb's got it in Arizona, and Jenny, and excellent. Carol's got it, excellent. So if you could bear with me and just sketch a brief nightscape, something that you would like to shoot over the next few months. It could be involve a moon, stars, Milky Way, meteors, zodiacal light, planets, constellations, Elvis, you name it. It can be really anything. And just sketch this out, because I'd like you to have this on hand to have as a sort of an inspiration or a motivation to help guide your thinking as we investigate this night shooting plan thing that I just shared with you. And I mean, we're talking about something like of this caliber, something, it's very, very crude. And, as you're working on that, I'm just going to start to go through this night shooting plan with you. This is not a particularly long, complicated webinar, but I think there's some important stuff here I think you'll find helpful. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with this block up here that I've highlighted in the red. And this block is what I call sort of basic logistics, basic timings. And as you can see, there's things like sunset, the time of sunset and sunrise, the time, date, location. I want to go through this with you, and I want to explain how to fill this out. But before I do that, though, there's something very important. And if you've seen a few of these webinars, you may have seen me explain this before, but I want to be very clear about how we define the time of sunset. This is a shot over the Pacific Ocean, around 10 years or so ago, maybe even longer. And this shows the sun setting over the ocean. And that's the sun, according to the astronomical oracles, the sun has not set yet. The sun has not set yet here. The sun has not even set here. I feel like I'm reading a Dr. Seuss book. And if you look very carefully, you can see the very top of the sun touching the horizon. And this is the moment of sunset. So when people talk about, when you look up the, oh, thanks, Milton. I'll share that again. I appreciate that. So if you were to look up the time of sunset, the time of sunset refers to this particular point right here, when the top of the sun is just about to disappear below the horizon. In fact, if you were to imagine, when I first started, I thought sunset was when the sun's, above the horizon or something like that, but it really isn't. And this is important because this kicks off our timeline in the evening, showing, sunset, civil twilight, nautical twilight, and astronomical twilight. And these are important because each one of these different phases of twilight affects what you could, as a night photographer, can shoot. Civil twilight, you don't see any stars, but it's great for shooting the moon against the beautiful colors of twilight. You can see alpenglow, you can see the Earth's shadow, you can see the belt of Venus, all these beautiful pinks and blues of the civil twilight. Nautical twilight is when the very first stars start to appear, and it's a gorgeous time of night. It's a beautifully serene period of the evening. You can see, as I say, the brighter stars. You don't really see the Milky Way. That really makes its appearance during astronomical twilight, as you can see here. This is up in Grand Teton National Park. So astronomical twilight is when the Milky Way starts to appear. And then, of course, after that, you have completely dark night when the sun is way below the horizon. And, it doesn't really affect the visibility of the night sky objects. So as you can see, we have these three periods of twilight: civil, nautical, astronomical twilight in the evening, same thing in reverse in the morning, and we have full darkness. So if you look at the colors here, I'm going to use these colors as sort of a quick color code as I explain how to use the night shooting plan. So you can see here, civil twilight, nautical twilight, astronomical twilight are shades of blue and purple, and then full darkness is black. Now, this is a great free website. You go to the Photographer's Ephemeris, Google that. And if you haven't started using this, it's a great free tool. I'm a big fan of Planet Pro and also PhotoPills, but Photographer's Ephemeris has been around forever. And it's a great source of information. And what I'm showing here is, this is on any given day. I've chosen the town Waseca, Minnesota, south of here. And you can see here, it gives you, for this particular day, all of this is June 1st, 2021, so that's this evening. It shows you all the times of in the morning and then in the evening when civil, nautical, and astronomical twilights end. So you can work out from that when things happen. So let's get down to it. Okay, we're going to get started. Basic logistics and timing. So in this example with that barn I showed a minute ago, I'm going to go on a journey of night photography around this barn. So we have I just give this thing an event. I mean, sometimes it's a solar eclipse, sometimes it's a lunar eclipse, sometimes it's a meteor shower. Right now, it's just dark skies in rural Minnesota. The location, is it, Death Valley National Park? Is it Table Mountain in South Africa? Is it, someplace in New Zealand? This is a barn near Waseca, Minnesota. That's what I'm going to call it. And the date is the night of tonight, June 1st, 2021. So there we are. So so when I fill out this thing, I just always do this on the night of, just so I know what it is. So if I go on a 4 or 5 day trip, I do one of these for each night. I look up the time of sunset and sunrise. And I'd ask that you look at this and try to bring this into your consciousness, because it's important that I know many of us are located all over the place. We've got South Africa, we've got Texas, we've got, South Carolina, all over the place. And it's a little bit different for us, but in this example, sunset occurs at basically just before 9 o'clock at night, and the sunrise happens around 5:30 in the morning. Okay, and at our latitude at this time of year, and for this day, the moon sets during the day. It doesn't really matter, but it rises tonight. The moon's going to rise here at 1:23 a.m. That's going to be important. It's not a full moon; it's a gibbous moon. I think it's a gibbous moon. I don't think it's past the third quarter, but in any event. Then we look up civil twilight. So that blue, when do we see the blues and the pinks? And I write that in here. Again, I do this from the Photographer's Ephemeris. So as you can see, we've got, civil twilight happens from sunset to some period after that, 9:30. I do the same thing with nautical twilight. And you can see here I've got this arrow pointing down. And so these twilights on the left are the evening twilights, and the ones in the morning are for the dawn twilights, when the sun is rising in the morning. So that's just my own nomenclature, so I can keep track of which is which. And then what you can see for the next one is the, lost my pointer here, there we go, is when does dark night take place? And this is really kind of important, of course, because this really dictates when we can really get down to business from our astrophotography point of view. Okay, so that's a whole table full of numbers, and I tell you, that doesn't mean a whole lot. That doesn't work for me. It doesn't do a whole lot for me. And so instead, what I like to do is I create this visual representation of these key times. So in the second block of this night shooting plan sheet, I've just created an area where you can, schematically illustrate what's going on. So you don't have to rely on interpreting numbers at 2 in the morning when it's freezing outside. So I start off with, if you look carefully here, you can see this row, everything lines up in a row. So we have the sunset rises at 8:49, or sunset, sorry, the sunset rises. What does that mean? The sun sets at 8:49. So we have the sun setting about here. I mean, it's not super exact. And then it rises at 5:35 tomorrow morning. So in this block here, midnight is right in the middle. So this is evening, and then this is 8 o'clock at night, 9 o'clock at night, 10 o'clock, 11, midnight, 1, 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning, all the way through to the morning. And then here, look at this. The moon rises roughly around 1:23 a.m. Okay, that seems important. And now look what I do here. I just sketch in these blocks for these evening twilights. I don't use color. I don't do any of this in color when I'm in the field. I'm just doing these colors to help remind you what these different phases of twilight are. And I do the same thing in the morning. And then I also fill in dark night. And this to me is just a super helpful way to, there's just a super helpful way to visualize what's going on in a given evening. In the wintertime, northern or southern hemisphere, you have much longer periods of darkness than you do in the summertime. In some places at high latitudes, you don't ever leave astronomical twilight. And of course, at polar latitudes, you never leave daylight. So, it's just one of those things. But if you find this helpful, then, that's a wonderful thing. And that's really the point of this. This is the place I start with all of this. Now, the next thing I just want to point out for this evening is right away, look at this. You get some kind of insights, because tonight there is a very limited window of darkness, only really about 2 hours of darkness tonight. Because what happens is astronomical twilight doesn't end until 11:06 p.m. So that's when darkness really first starts, is a few minutes after 11 o'clock. And then at 1:20 a.m. as the moon rises. And in fact, for maybe a half hour before the moon rises, it's going to affect the sky brightness. So really between 11 p.m. and 1 a.m. is the only time tonight, those 2 hours, when we have actual darkness. So this for me at least, looking at these this visual interpretation of what's going on, I can see that right away, because that's when I look at the left-hand side of darkness, and when the moon comes up. If I just look at this table of numbers, it doesn't really do it for me. So anyway, there's that, and we're good. Okay, so what we've done here is we've established I love the comments coming through. So and Milton, I'll come to your question in a second, but I'm excited to hear about Deb's Joshua Tree trip too. But what we've done here is we've just established the basic parameters of tonight's night photography options. So now we can start getting down to planning our projects, and this is where things get interesting. So again, this is the barn that is our location for this evening, or corn crib. I need to call it a corn crib, corn shed from now on. This is our corn shed that we're going to use as our subject for this evening. And we're going to look at 3 projects, how to plan 3 projects: a basic star trails project. This is using a circular fisheye lens. A basic panorama, real simple. This was from I think not early this morning, but very late last night. And then some basic, just a basic Milky Way core shot. As I mentioned, this was I was doing a private session with my client here, who's standing right here doing some photography at the same time, and I wanted to capture this just to capture their presence as well as the overall scene, just as a way of representing what's happening. So these are the 3 projects we're going to look at. We're going to look at a star trails, Milky Way panorama, and then just a Milky Way core with some light painting inside the barn. Nothing fancy at all, just some basic stuff. So we're going to come back to our sheet, and this is where we're going to enter each one of those 3 projects. So we've got our sunset, our twilights, visual. Now we've got our projects, and now we want to plan those out. We want to really get down to brass tacks. So the next things we want to do is to fill in what I call the technical details. That's the lens, the body, estimated parameters, stuff like that. So in this case, what I have here is just a few real basic things. So you can see I've got I have basically tripod A and tripod B. So I have 2 tripods. And on the first tripod for the Star Trails, I just make a note of the lens, my 8mm fisheye, the camera body I'm using. I don't need anything extra for the Star Trails. I'm doing in-camera interval shooting. For the Milky Way shots, I'm using my 810A. It's a great camera. I've had it for ages. And a couple of different lenses. I want to use a 24-70 for the Milky Way, but I want to switch over to the 14-24 for the panorama. And again, this is all, gibberish to you right now. Don't worry about it. It doesn't matter. We talk about all this stuff in other webinars, but this is just an example for tonight. And then over here, I just indicate, do we need any special equipment, a light wand, a pano head, that sort of thing. And then I just estimate the ISO, the exposure settings, the ISO, aperture, or f-stop, and the shutter speed. These are variable. I'm not inscribing these in stone, but again, this is just kind of a guide. So when I'm, mentally blurred at 3 in the morning, I have something to start with in case I forget. Then we're ready to actually, when we're going to plan the shot. So now we're getting down to when are we going to start and when are we going to finish? And we're pretty close to being good to go with this thing. So the first thing I want to do is I want to note that from the Milky Way point of view, from the Star Trails point of view, if you look carefully here, you can see a very thin red line coming down from the middle of nautical twilight. I like to start, if possible, I like to start and end my Star Trail shots during about halfway through nautical twilight. That gives me the best number of options for actually starting the Star Trail and getting some different star colors. So, I can see here that, so this line right here is about halfway through nautical twilight. That's the earliest I would start. And then the latest I would run would be halfway through nautical twilight in the morning, which is 4:30. Now, of course, this evening we have the moon coming up at 1:23, so that kind of makes that a little tricky. But nonetheless, there it is. That's my general window of opportunity for shooting Star Trails. Next up is shooting the Milky Way. Now, as I indicated, it's a fairly narrow window this evening. Starting a little after 11 o'clock. Which is when full darkness begins, unless I want to include astronomical twilight, which is an awesome idea. And then I'm probably going to end, no later than when the moon comes up, because that's when the whole night sky changes in appearance, and maybe even a little bit earlier than that. So I have these 2 projects with the same camera, the same tripod, 2 different lenses, so I need to break that up. So then what I do is just as a kind of a guide, I'll say, well, okay, I'm going to start off doing my Milky Way shots. Then I'm going to switch over to do my Milky Way panorama with a 14mm. And I may go back and finish up with some more Milky Way shots before the moon comes up. And that's kind of it. And we're done. I mean, this is my night shooting plan. There it is. We're finished. And let me translate it for you now, because it's a little bit in Mike Shaw language, and not everyone speaks Mike Shaw language. And I appreciate that. So what this says to me, especially this part down here, this bottom part, is if I were to go out and do this barn this evening, do some night photography of this barn, what I would do is I'd go to this barn at this location tonight, and I would start shooting my Star Trails at 9:30 p.m. And this is the camera I'm going to use, and this is the lens I'm going to use. I'm going to put it on tripod A. So that gives me a clear starting point. I'm going to start my Star Trails at this time with this camera and lens. Then I'm going to chill out, maybe do some other things. At 11:30 p.m. is when it's the first opportunity to start shooting the Milky Way core. And I'm going to use my D810A with my 24-70 lens on my second tripod. So I'm going to do that until midnight. And then at midnight, I'm going to switch lenses back to the 14-24. I'm going to do my Milky Way panorama. And around 12:30 in the morning, I'm going to switch back to the 24-70 for my final Milky Way core shots before the moon rises. And that when, when the moon rises, I'm probably going to switch off my star trails and then collapse and sleep in the back of my car, or drive home and collapse at home. One of those things. But that's really about it, So, I mean, this right here is kind of where we are with this webinar. I'm going to wrap it up here in